Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on mysterious and weird, true stories, from glitches to the paranormal. This is my channel's weekly compendium for the week ending Monday, March 21st, 2022. Case file number 553, written by Milo Farakis. I'm in grave danger. I have a galley-style kitchen. I was washing dishes and my phone was on the counter behind me. I was listening to Mr. Revenant stories. I turned around from the sink to grab another container to wash and noticed my phone had gone from the video to the comment section of the video. I looked closer and noticed that it was queued up to reply to a comment. A message was already written in, but had not been sent. It said, "I'm in danger." All in lowercase like that. My phone automatically autocorrects lowercase I'm to I'm uppercase. It is possible a water droplet from my dish gloves flung onto my phone when I reached it, but I don't think it could type a whole message. After I checked on my husband, I called my mom and texted my brother. Everyone was fine. About a half hour later, when I went back to the kitchen, I was momentarily overcome with nausea and felt sweaty, but it passed after a few minutes. I have no idea what that was. I didn't feel like I was the one in danger. Maybe just a strange, unexplainable glitch and the nausea was unrelated? Or was it a message from someone? But I can't think of who it would be. Any thoughts? Also, I scanned my phone for viruses or malware. I didn't find any. I don't know anyone personally who would want to hack my phone. I'm basically a hermit. I have agoraphobia and work from home. I haven't received any weird texts. I don't have any apps that I didn't download myself from a Play Store. It's still possible, but it seems like my phone wasn't hacked. The next day, I put my phone in the same spot and was washing dishes again while listening to YouTube, and nothing happened. Case notes, file number 553. So this is one of those glitches that makes you question what entities exist that we can't see. You asked if you think the sudden nausea afterwards was a coincidence. It could be, of course, but my gut tells me that something was indeed controlling your phone. We know that spirits can manipulate and even generate EM fields, which our phones use in many ways to function. Could a spirit have typed that? The question then is, why would they? If they're already dead, can spirits experience pain? What kind of a threat could a spirit have? The danger aspect doesn't really add up towards it being a spirit. And if your phone was hacked, why would they type, "I'm in danger," without specifying some way to know who they were or where they were? Or perhaps it was your own message from the future, trying to warn yourself. But nothing I think of here fits perfectly, primarily because the message was so short and incomplete. There's nothing you can really do with it, besides be befuddled. Case file number 554, written by Reese Peace. Milo, the Pitbull. No, Milo, the Beagle? I'm not sure where to even start. This all happened 2 mornings ago. I honestly feel crazy. I can only think of 3 possible situations. 1. My friends and family are playing the most elaborate prank I've ever heard of. 2. I'm going crazy. 3. I woke up in an alternate universe. So for context, I got my dog Milo 4 years ago from my cousin. He was a 1-year-old Pitbull at the time. When I got him, my girlfriend was worried because we have a 1-bedroom apartment and she thought a Pitbull may be too large for our apartment. So Friday morning, I got out of bed to feed Milo and take him for a walk. I go into my kitchen and there is sitting a dog I don't recognize. It's a smallish Beagle and I've literally never seen it before and have no idea whose dog it is. My mind starts racing because I'm not sure how it could have gotten into my apartment. My first thought is that my girlfriend must be sitting a dog. She works the 3rd shift from 1 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. I go to bed around 10 p.m. every night, so I was assuming I went to bed and one of her friends must have asked her to watch their dog. I sent her a text asking whose dog it is. I decided I'll walk Milo and this dog separately because I've never had to walk 2 dogs at once. I go to the bathroom to find Milo because that's the only place he could be hanging out. I walk into the bathroom and it's empty. I call for him and here comes the Beagle? I'm confused, but again, I assume my girlfriend must have something to do with this. Maybe she took Milo somewhere and didn't go to work and didn't get a chance to tell me. At this time, I noticed the dog has a collar with a name tag. I reach down to read it and my stomach drops. It says Milo. I was kind of freaked out, but I honestly thought it was a coincidence. I text my girlfriend again and ask where she and Milo are, and that I'm going to take this dog for a walk and look for Milo. I go out and I'm looking everywhere in the neighborhood for Milo. I was really worked up and didn't notice I had some missed messages from my girlfriend. They basically say she has no idea what I'm talking about and freaking out about where Milo is. As I go to respond, I see her pull into our neighborhood. She parks and jumps out of the car and runs up to the Beagle crying and saying, "I thought he was gone. Where'd you find him?" I ask what she means, and she says you said Milo was gone. And I said yes, he is. And she gets this weird look on her face and asks if this was some corny prank. We watch YouTube prank couples a lot. I start crying from frustration and tell her, no, Milo is really missing. I tell her how I woke up to this dog and that Milo was just gone. She still thinks I'm messing with her and says that she doesn't understand the prank and kind of gets annoyed and starts to take the dog inside. She tells me my prank was stupid and didn't work. I start getting mad and telling her this isn't a prank and that Milo is really gone, and she screams, "No the hell he isn't. He's right here. What are you even talking about?" Something about how serious she was completely devastated me, and everything just kind of clicked that this dog was really Milo. I start freaking the hell out and telling her that Milo is a Pitbull and that I don't know what the hell is going on. I pull out my phone to get pictures of Pitbull Milo, and everything is gone. No photos of Milo at all. There's just a mix of pictures I remember and ones that I don't. There's pictures of this Beagle Milo on my phone though. I start having a panic attack. I call my mom. She has no idea what I'm calling about. I message my friends in our Snapchat group chat. They're clueless as well. I call my cousin that knows Milo, and she tells me that he's definitely a Beagle. I don't know what's going on. Milo was 100% a Pitbull. My city doesn't let Pitbulls at the dog park, so we've never even been. This is something I talk to my girlfriend about a lot. How would I have memories like that? My family thinks I'm joking. Meanwhile, my girlfriend wants me to go to the doctor. I feel like I'm going insane, and I can't stop crying because I want Milo back, and if I'm in some other timeline, I'm afraid to find out what else is different. One thing that I've noticed is that anyone I bring this up with has a bad reaction to me mentioning an alternate timeline. They get visibly upset. I'm so lost, y'all. I'm writing this more for documentation than anything. So in case I wake up tomorrow and everything's normal, maybe this post will still be here for me to show my friends and family. If anyone has any idea what caused this, please let me know. Case file number 555, written by Drink Beer and Fight, The Universe's Mr. K. I run a custom trim shop / hardwood lumberyard. Both glitches involve long-time customers, guys who I know on site. The first time it happened was around 2010. We had a few contractors who did enough business with us that they had accounts. They could just sign for material rather than usual payment on delivery model. I'm not saying all contractors are shady, but there are a lot of fly-by-the-night guys who say they'll pay when the jobs are done, but you never hear from them again. I get that not everyone has the capital to lay out for material, but I've been burned enough to know the difference between an established business and the cash-on-delivery guys. Anyway, call this customer Mr. C. One day, Mr. C comes in and his left hand is heavily bandaged. Obviously, I asked what happened. Mr. C was cutting a piece of plywood on a table saw by himself. Halfway through, it started to fall off the table. He put his hand down to push it back onto the table and it sliced the top of his middle finger, half of his ring finger, and all of his pinky finger off. We talked about it and agreed how table saws are the most dangerous tools. I actually know more guys who've been injured from nail guns, but I was being sympathetic. Anyway, I didn't see Mr. C for 5 or 6 weeks. I saw he had an order ready for pickup one day and made sure I was in the shop. I wanted to say hi and check on how he was holding up after his accident. When I walked up to the loading dock, Mr. C and one of our employees were loading red oak baseboards into his box van. Mr. C was using both hands, both fully fingered hands. I didn't say anything. I just helped them load the material into the van and made sure the paperwork was in order. After he pulled out, I said something to my employee about how I thought Mr. C had cut his fingers from his left hand. My employee just looked at me weird and said he didn't know what I was talking about. This employee knew about Mr. C's accident. He was there the day Mr. C showed up in bandages. I know that we discussed it and nail guns. No one in the shop knew what I was talking about, so I let it go. Mr. C officially retired a few years ago with all of his fingers. My second glitch actually had a witness. July 2018, I was eating lunch in the break room with one of our older employees. We weren't talking, just eating our microwave leftovers and staring at our phones. He grunts and says, "Mr. K died." I was taken aback and he showed me the obituary. Mr. K had been killed in an automobile accident the previous weekend. Arrangements were scheduled at the local funeral home on Friday. I felt bad that I couldn't go to the calling hours. Mr. K had been a friend of my grandpa's. They were both carpenters. My kid had friends coming for a sleepover that night, and I wasn't going to cancel it to go to calling hours for a guy I really didn't know. My dad was going anyway, so our family was still represented. Fast forward to January 2019. That same employee walks into the office and says he has a customer that requires my assistance. That's a usual code for, "Here's a Karen that we don't want to deal with." I walk out to the warehouse, and standing there is Mr. K. Longtime employee walks behind Mr. K, looking at me with his eyebrows raised so high they are disappearing into his ball cap. I was stunned. I greeted him, shook his hand. I asked him how he's been doing. He said he's been fine. We found the couple of boards he needed for his project. He paid and was on his way. As he was pulling out, my employee said, "I swear I thought he was dead." Amazed that I wasn't the only one this time, I agreed. We talked for a while about how we both remember reading the obituary. I went back to the office and called my dad. I asked him if Mr. K was alive. He said he hadn't heard otherwise. Dad didn't remember going to a funeral. I've only talked to my employee about it one other time. We just chalked it up to an oddity, but it still weirds me out. Case file number 556, written by Jenny Puff, a Culinary Armament, Dematerialized. I accidentally dropped my favorite knife. I dropped it into a box I use for light repairs. It's a regular box, a reused Amazon box, 9-inch deep, and I watched it sink down into my stuff, so I stuck my hand in the box trying to reach after it, barely grazing it with my fingers. But it kept sinking further and further, and then finally I felt the bottom of the cardboard box. I took the box and poured out all the contents looking for my knife. I looked all over and opened everything up and I couldn't find it at all. So then I looked all around the box. I moved furniture around. I even poured the box out again a second time, but there wasn't anything there. Every now and then I pour out everything from that box and try looking for it again, but it never turns up. And it sucks so much because I saw it, I felt it. Then suddenly I didn't anymore. I feel like it just poofed from existence. Ugh, it was my favorite knife too. I can't get it again because it was from a Fry's Black Friday sale, and Fry's doesn't exist anymore. Anyway, I wish I could tell my parents, but they'll just say I lost it because I sometimes misplace things, but this wasn't that. Case notes, file number 556. So another DOP, disappearing object phenomena. Can't get enough of these glitches because they match with my own. The good news for you, there's a decent chance your object will return. Mine haven't, but hey, mine were just tennis balls, so I'm not too shaken up about that. I hope your beautiful knife does come back. That is, unless the mechanical elves on the other side dimension decide, hey, this is a great knife, I think I'll keep it. I mean, they must need to cook too, right? What kind of dishes do extra-dimensional entities eat? Nothing too appetizing, I'm sure. Although I'm not a very adventurous eater, I stick with what I know. Mostly Subway. And pizza. Although, never told anyone this, I get pizza without cheese. I'm a heretic. Bonus file, written by Apart Cardiologist 54, the ghost car on our lawn. This has happened several times at this point. It started about 16 months ago when I was cleaning my house around 12 a.m. My husband, boyfriend at the time, worked nights, so I had adjusted to his schedule. I usually kept the blinds open during the day and would go around closing them at night, while I tidied up before bed. Our room was my last stop on the first night this happened. The curtains and blinds were open as I was sweeping the floor when I felt the sensation of being watched. I looked around me when my eyes focused on the silver sedan parked outside my house, mostly in the grass on my front lawn. Now, for context, my bedroom window is about 15 yards from the road in front of my house. It's a small front yard in a pretty decently populated neighborhood. Anyway, I saw the car before I saw her or him. I'm not sure, but there was clearly someone sitting in the driver's seat of the car and another person standing about 5 yards from my window, clearly staring at me. The only reason I could see this is because the moon was fairly bright tonight. I shrieked and dropped to the floor and crawled to the light switch to turn it off so I couldn't be seen. I called my husband to ask him what I should do, and he told me to call the cops. Duh. I did, and of course, by the time they got there, the car was gone. They asked if they could see my security footage, and I agreed, but the footage from that section of time was just gone. It skipped over the few minutes that they would have been outside. This has happened several times since then, and I've completely given up on calling the police as I feel they'll think I'm crazy. I have no proof that this is happening, but I would like to have some opinions as to what they may be doing. In the past 16 months, it's happened probably 10 times. Sometimes the person is standing in the yard, and sometimes they aren't. Also, the car has been different every single time, but the light is always on inside the cabin of the vehicle when I go to look. The people inside are never looking where I can see their faces. I'll run to grab my phone to call someone, but they will already be gone. I went into our guest bathroom, which is the only one downstairs besides the one in our master bedroom. It's located in a corner hallway next to the 2 spare rooms in the house, currently his office and our son's room. I went inside and quickly did my business. I don't like being alone, for obvious reasons I feel, and started to wash my hands. The sink is right next to the door. While I was drying my hands, I heard and saw the shadow under the door. Someone run up to the door, stop, turn around, and run into one of the adjacent rooms. I figured it was my husband ready to start the game again and ripped open the door. I fully searched each one of the rooms and didn't find anyone, which I should have if it was him. There was no time for him to run by the time whatever was moved from the door and I opened it, and I clearly saw the shadow go right towards the rooms and not left towards the living room. The second thing that happened was while my husband and I were playing pool, which is right next to our front door. Right after we broke, we heard a loud knock at the front door. We looked at each other, obviously confused as it was pretty late at night. We both went to the door and answered it. There was no one there, and we both stepped out onto the porch to take a look around. We stayed out there for about 30 seconds or so to take a look around and headed back in when we saw nothing. We were both shocked to see that the pool balls were in a straight line down the center of the pool table. It was very shocking since, as I mentioned, we had just broken and the pool balls were scattered when we exited. The third and most recent thing that has happened was when I was alone in the house. Shocker. I was sweeping the steps and some of the plaster-like stuff on the ceiling had started to flake off and make a huge mess. I was cleaning up the landing at the top of the steps when I started mouthing off at the energy that I felt around me. I felt unwelcome in my own home, and that pissed me off. I know I shouldn't have said the things I did, but I was pissed as it's my house. I don't write what I said here, as I still live in this home and don't want to put those words back into existence, and you'll see why. There are 3 rooms up the stairs, and all 3 doors were closed during this time. Once I started getting really belligerent, all 3 doors started to shake violently in the door frames. It was as if there was someone behind each of them just shaking and banging them against the frames. I immediately started having a panic attack and sank to the floor. I screamed out for whatever it was to stop and that I was sorry, and surprisingly, it did. I bolted down the stairs to find my phone and call my husband. As I was about halfway down, I felt a hard and violent shove on the center of my back that almost caused me to tumble down the remainder of the steps. My husband has never felt threatened in our home, but I constantly feel it, even before I made all those comments. And this all happened before the car started showing up. and they were all several months apart. Case file number 557, written by 333 Visions. An entity in my living room. This happened over 10 years ago, when I was about 17 or 18 years old. My older brother and I were both living with our parents at the time, and it was only 4 of us that lived in the house. I came home a little late one night and was greeted by a locked front door. I had no house key to get in, and I didn't want to wake my parents up as they'd be irritated to say the least. So I decided to walk around back to see if the back doors happened to be unlocked. Our house was a L-shaped home, with one window in the living room on what would be the bottom of the L, and double doors around back that led into the living room. As I went along the side of the house, bottom of the L, I noticed the living room light was on, and I looked through the window to see if anyone was in there. It was my brother. The back of his head was facing towards me. He was sitting in his usual position watching TV, kind of half sitting, half laying down on the couch. I thought, sweet, I'll just walk around to the back and knock on the doors to let me in. As I got to the back of the house, where the doors were, I was met with no TV or lights on in the living room. I thought it was kind of odd, but maybe he shut everything off and went to bed in that 5-second span of me walking around back. That would be fast. So I pulled out my phone and called him, which he answered, and I asked if he could let me in. He said, "I'm not home, I'm at the bar right now." My heart sank into my stomach and I got goosebumps to the core. I told him I just saw him in the living room through the window. We both got freaked out, and I ended up waiting for him to get home before going inside. Needless to say, I didn't sleep that night. We still talk about it quite often, and we simply have no explanation for what happened that night. If you're wondering, could it not have been my dad? They have a different hair color, brown and blonde, respectively, and completely different builds, and I was not under the influence of any substance to mistake them. Case file number 558, written by KSN Chusnan. I crashed my snowmobile into another universe. In February 2020, I was snowmobiling for the first time. My boyfriend at the time was driving all day and finally let me drive at the end of the trip. We had been dating for 2 months, and this was our first trip together. I'm going around the last bend, and I accidentally floor the snowmobile instead of pushing the brake. I go flying off a cliff and end up 50 feet down. The snowmobile is on top of me, upside down, still running with the bottom part spinning. My helmet has flown off and my head is 1 inch from a tree. I'm terrified. My boyfriend managed to roll off the back at the last minute and is trying to save me, but the snow is really deep and he's having a hard time getting down the steep cliff. My legs are fully submerged in snow with the snowmobile on top, and I'm not sure if I'm paralyzed. He calls for help, and all these men run down to save me. When they finally pull me out, I can stand, and it's the happiest moment of my life. I'm not paralyzed. I don't have so much as a scratch on me. Do I have a concussion? Maybe. It's hard to say. The snowmobile also miraculously has minimal damage, only the little plastic windshield part is cracked. In hindsight, this moment is where everything changed for me. But you have to understand, I didn't piece this together and come to this realization until months later. These are the differences in my life. There was suddenly a pandemic. Everything was shut down within a few days. In my old timeline, there was a virus going around, but it had only impacted a few people and was similar to the flu, nothing concerning. I had a different job. At the time, I chalked it up to the pandemic. We were on the trip because I was about to start a new job. I had signed the contract and I knew what the role entailed. I was going to start the Monday after. But after the crash, I couldn't get a hold of my new boss for 9 months, and he finally told me I got the job in November, even though I had accepted it in February. He also comments how I've never been into the office, when in fact he gave me a tour in January of 2020, and we spent the day together. The role I'm in is completely different than the papers I signed. My loving, awesome boyfriend was now physically abusive for the first time that night. He blacked out and attacked me, choking me. He was crying the next day, and nothing like this has ever happened before. I thought he was traumatized from the crash and let it go. That was another thing that was different. I would have never let that go before. I come from a loving childhood where my dad was my best friend always. I would have never put up with that before the crash and was shocked that I did. In the old timeline, I was on a low dose of Effexor, Xanax, and blood pressure medication. I don't take any medication at all in this timeline. Over the next year, a series of weird things that don't make any sense keep happening to the point I start to feel suspicious. I suddenly have an incurable disease I didn't have before. I'm in pictures I have no idea what the context is. I'm wearing clothes I don't own anymore. My friends have memories of me I don't share, and I'm getting more and more depressed. The boyfriend keeps physically abusing me, and I can't get out of it. It's as if my own will evaporated away. I just keep thinking, this can't be my life. This isn't my life. It just felt like I wasn't supposed to be here, and I finally look at Reddit and realize that I died in the snowmobile crash, and that this is an alternate universe I'm in. I start to just agree with friends when they say, remember when you said this and that, and we went here and did this? But in truth, I have no recollection. Also, my CAT scans are normal at this point after visiting the ER. To be honest, I wasn't the most observant person to begin with. A new couch could be in the living room for days and I wouldn't notice. So when all the stores and shops are different in one area of town, I don't know if that was always there or new. I finally worked up the nerve to tell my sister, who is surprisingly supportive. She asked what else is different. There was this song in the other timeline. It was a very popular song by a Shania Twain or Sheryl Crow type. Anyone would know it. I sing it to her with the lyrics and tell her we always used to listen to it growing up. She has no recollection of it. I typed the words into Google. The song doesn't exist here. The longer I'm in this timeline, the more I forget the words and melody of the old song. Also, there was no iPhone 13 in the other timeline because Steve Jobs was superstitious and it was supposed to go from iPhone 12 to iPhone 14. I notice little glitches like that are stupid and don't really matter. How do I feel about it now? I've accepted my new reality. I feel bad for my sister and parents in the old timeline that they're dealing with my death in a freak snowmobile accident, but there's nothing I can do. Trying to find them again would be like trying to walk from Canada to Australia with no map, impossible, and a waste of time, and also a drowning. I'm just making my reality the best I can now. It clearly, for some reason, wasn't my time to die. I mean to the point of going to the afterlife, if there is one. So I should do something important if I can. I was always agnostic before this, but didn't believe in different timelines. I thought movies like The Butterfly Effect and Run, Lola, Run were dumb concepts. Now I don't rule anything out ever. About my iPhone. Jobs died in 2011 in the old timeline as well, but he had planned out the designs for the phones way past when he died because he knew he had cancer. He had an elaborate release plan of the phones in the future. Did he not hear? And yes, he designed them so that the iPhone 13 would be skipped because he was superstitious. Have I been to therapy? Yes, I've been to multiple therapists, psychiatrists, counselors. I can't find any evidence of the Effexor prescription I had, and I don't know who would have prescribed it. The bottles were just gone. I don't rule out that I bumped my head and some bad crap happened to the world after that. This is just my theory. I see a lot of people saying, I want to believe you, but I mean really, that's your choice. It doesn't impact me either way. I just wanted to share my story. Case notes, file number 558. A few interesting points here regarding your quantum immortality experience. The first is how you feel as if you yourself have changed. I have never heard of this happening, but it would make some sense. One common question I've had posed to me is, what happens to the consciousness that is taken over when we die in one universe and our sentience is transposed into another us in a different universe? Presumably the us in that new universe was already occupied. So do we erase the consciousness already there? Personally, I think it's nothing so dark. I think an automatic blending occurs. Your personality then changed precisely because you merged with the one that was the you in this universe. I think this isn't reported on often because most people jump into a universe very nearly identical to their past one. with usually just minimal cosmetic changes like their loved one having a different haircut or something like that. But you, this new universe is radically different. A pandemic, a different job, your boyfriend is abusive, etc. So the you in this universe was significantly different from the you in the first universe. Thus, the blending had more notable effects, such as you tolerating things you would never have tolerated before. I still believe in free will though, so while your personality may be influenced, you can still focus hard to make the choices you want to make. I think you'll be okay. Case file number 559, written by Broxy Losky Tuxky. Do you want to ride from an alien? So about 2 years ago, I would walk to and from high school. I only live around 4 blocks away, so it was a brisk walk to and from. I live in a safe neighborhood in the middle of a desirable school district. I know all of my neighbors, even the ones down the block, and recognize everyone on my walk to and from. That's why this shook me up so much. I was walking back home from school one afternoon when a yellow car pulled up just a few feet behind me. I didn't think anything of it and kept walking, yet they honked at me. I turned around and looked at the car and I vaguely recognized the people inside. There was a driver and 2 kids my age in the back. The driver looked similar to my homeroom teacher, and the 2 kids looked similar to 2 twins who are in my grade. I felt as if something was telling me to keep walking and ignore them, but like a horror movie protagonist, curiosity got the best of me, and I walked over to the car. When I got closer, I noticed details about the people in the car that seemed off. For one, they looked eerily similar to the people I knew from school, yet each one had a few details that made them unrecognizable. It felt like the uncanny valley effect. I can't really explain it well unless you know the people in person, but it was like someone had a police sketch of them made, ultra realistic, if that makes sense. When I got to the passenger window, the woman said, "Do you know these 2 from school?" And I just said, yeah, I think so. And she nodded and asked if I needed a ride home. I told her my dad would pick me up a block down from here. She asked if I needed a ride down the block, and I told her I would be fine. I felt the worst kind of vomit-inducing dread when the woman talked to me, and it didn't help me that the 2 girls were dead silent in the back the entire conversation. She told me to have a good day, and as I walked away, she honked at me again. I whipped my head around, completely freaked out, and she just smiled and waved at me. I booked it home after that, locked my doors, and waited for my dad and sisters to get home. When they did, I told them what happened. My dad was nonchalant about it, telling me to not walk up to cars next time. My sister, on the other hand, was super freaked out, and even now doesn't want me to bring it up. My friends think that I met some weird doppelgangers, and I kind of agree. 2 years later, and I can still remember this. It just weirds me out. Case file number 560, written by Drums is Life, the Rainbow UFO. I live on some property on the edge of Bryan, Texas, and I saw something strange about a week or 2 ago. I hesitated to post it anywhere or tell anyone besides my girlfriend, who I was on the phone with at the time. It was about 10 p.m. on a weeknight, and I was following my usual nightly routine of walking my dog down the half-mile-long gravel road from my house to the highway and back to check the mail. The road curves about a quarter way down, and it's a straight shot to the highway from there. As I rounded the curve, I noticed a large orb that was pulsating color and flickering throughout all the colors of the rainbow. It seemed to be hovering in the air, like at about the height of a helicopter. It was very similar in appearance to the star Sirius when it's low in the sky, like how it flickers and changes colors, but it was much, much bigger. At first, I actually thought I was looking at Sirius, and it was somehow appearing huge, like how the moon looks huge when it's on the horizon. But I could actually see Sirius itself over to the left. I couldn't tell exactly how far away it was, but it was about the relative size of like if you held a quarter at arm's length, if that makes sense. It wasn't moving at all, just sitting there in the air, and it made no noise. I had been on the phone with my girlfriend, and I described to her what I was seeing as I watched it for about 30 seconds. I then thought I heard a coyote or some other animal a little behind me. So I turned around to shine my flashlight and make sure there wasn't anything immediately around me. I had only looked away for about 3 seconds, but when I looked back at the orb, It had completely disappeared. I have no idea what this orb could be. I don't think it could have been a helicopter or plane because I've never seen one flash rainbow colors like that, sit completely still like that, or make zero noise. I live in a dead quiet area, and I always hear helicopters and planes well before I see them. I also don't think it was a drone because it was way too big to be a drone. Drones make a very specific noise, impossible to mistake for anything else. It was the opposite direction from the town center and the nearby Texas A&M campus, so I don't think it could have been anyone shooting anything off from their backyard or something like that. I don't even know anything that anyone could shoot off or fly that would look like that. I sat on this sighting for a while, not knowing if I should tell anyone or who to even tell, but it's perplexed me for a while now, and I'm ready to share to all who will listen. Case notes, file number 560. This would be my first telling of a rainbow-style UFO. Fascinating. Makes me think of something simple but obvious. What if the aliens who are here observing us are constantly trying to perfect or improve their own technology? Just because they're more advanced than us doesn't mean the tech they have is perfect, that it can never be improved. Perhaps they've managed to improve their tech, but as such, the light it emits, instead of just orbs that are one specific color, they rotate for some reason. I also know, given the tech they have, whenever they're seen, it's because they want to be seen, either to further societal discourse or for specific individuals. I think it's more likely the former. Think about it. If we had ships that could travel between solar systems, and we found a planet with complex sentient life such as ourselves, would we immediately introduce ourselves? Of course not. Outside of concepts like Star Trek's Prime Directive, assuming we don't develop something along those lines, but that we do want to make introductions with lower species, how would we do it? I think very slowly, carefully. It's that old adage that people just aren't ready to accept the truth. So make your ship known locally to a small number of people over years and even decades. Introduce the very concept into culture. Maybe even deal with governments to do this. Well, that's how I would do it. Case file number 561, written by Control-Alt-Mayo. Going off script is wrecking my life. I saw an old video somewhere on YouTube about how we unconsciously have scripts ready to say during conversations with people and how we go about our daily lives. Like that weird feeling we get when we just have to say something? People say if you choose not to say anything during the conversation or choose not to do the specific action set out for your person to do it, it could create consequences or glitches to occur. I personally didn't believe this at first and thought it was just something to scare people, but I wanted to try it out and see if anything weird does happen. So one day, while I was in the living room, seated beside my younger brother who's around 10, just scrolling through my phone, he suddenly started talking about Fortnite and the new update. I wasn't really tuned into the conversation, but just kept agreeing. At one point during the conversation, it switched to talking about stars and the galaxy, since science was one of his favorite subjects. I suddenly remembered about the concept of each of us having our own scripts in the conversation, so I decided to test it out. My little brother would often ask me questions about science, since it was my strong suit at school. Sometimes I would just say random BS or an actual well-known fact. So when he asked me what the difference between seeing a planet in the sky and a star in the sky, I stayed quiet. For the first few seconds, it was just silence as he was waiting for the answer. I already had the answer, which was, stars blink and planets don't, in my head, but I chose not to say it. I got up from my seat and told him I was going to make Milo for myself. Suddenly, as I got up, he said, "Aren't you supposed to say stars blink and planets don't?" I turned around and said, "What? That's what you're supposed to say. Why didn't you say it?" At that point, I kinda got freaked out because that was word for word the answer in my mind. Keep in mind, he's just 10 years old. I told him, "How did you know what I was going to say?" "That's what they said." That freaked me out even more, because he could have just said he searched it on Google or something, so that's why he knows. I asked who they were, and it was like something out of a movie, because he suddenly looked at me, confused, and said, "I don't know either," also leaving him confused. The other incident was another day. My parents set up this foldable pool outside in our lawn. My little brother was again involved alongside my parents. My brother was swimming in the pool, and I could hear him from inside the house since the door was open. I had this urge in the back of my mind to go outside to him, but I fought against the script and made my way upstairs instead. I hear him suddenly scream, so I ran outside and saw that he hit his head on the metal pole of the side of the pool. Then he said, while laughing, "I thought you'd be standing there." My mom even laughed as well and stood on the corner where my brother hit his head on the pole and said, "You were supposed to stand right here." At that time, I didn't even bother questioning them about what they just said because they'll just say that they don't know again. So I just laughed and went back up to my room. Basically, what I noticed was that going off the script doesn't really show much of a glitch in the matrix, but more of other people saying weird things and them not understanding what they just said. I honestly think it's just their subconscious not understanding how to go about their scripts, since I didn't do it the way I was scripted to, so they just say weird things, feeling uncomfortable. However, one thing I did notice was my life gradually becoming worse as the days passed after going off script. Examples are my door, which was just brand new, suddenly breaking off as I opened it, more loud ringing in my ears at the most random times. I have tinnitus, so I actually know what normal ear ringing sounds like for me, and other stuff in my room specifically just breaking or disappearing from existence. There are more experiences with the going off script thing, but there's my weird experiences with glitches. If you want to try doing what I did and going off the script, it's just basically you going against your gut feeling during a situation, doing a completely random course of action you would never do, or holding back a reply during a conversation. Case file number 562, written by Josh T. 123. My sister vanished from a locked room. We were at a hotel celebrating my dad's birthday. We were exiting the pool and walking back to my dad's room to eat pizza that we had ordered. I was just a few steps behind my sister and her daughter. I watched her walk into a room and, being just a few steps behind her, I didn't feel like I was confused about where she was going. Yet, when I turned to enter the room, I noticed that it said, meeting room. I thought, that's strange. They rented the meeting room so we could eat pizza? I tried to open the room. It was, not surprisingly, locked. It didn't make any sense for us to have the meeting room anyway. So I walked to my dad's room, which was 3 doors, approximately 20 to 30 feet away, and there she was. The obvious answer is that I was mistaken and simply went to the wrong room. But I don't feel like there's any way I could have made this mistake on my own. I was literally just 10 feet or so behind her. I wasn't distracted. My eyes were on her the entire time. I watched her walk in and then tried to follow her into a locked room.